Welcome to part two of Sound in Our Lives. This is where we look more at some of the people who give us ideas what to do, and if you want to follow up on your own. Um, we don't always know how sound affects us. It's one thing we're sitting in the car at a stop sign, getting ready to go, and suddenly a car comes out of nowhere and almost, and we just, those are things we can trace and go, this made me nervous because I could have blah blah blah. But we don't always know what sound does. And R.J. Stewart, wonderful, well, magical pagan teacher out of Scotland, Wales, last I knew, has a book called Music and the Elemental Psyche. And this book, one of the things that I remember from it, I wish I could show you, but unfortunately, a lot of the good books I've lost over the years because I moved a lot. But he talks about how our sound environment is slowly corroding us. It is destroying us, and we don't always realize it. And he recommends, and I'll get into in another video, my version of what he recommends doing. Basically, it's a daily, twice a day, 15-minute sounding to reestablish our sounds in ourselves so that when the world tries to tear us down, we can go, forget it. But if you get the chance, Music and the Elemental Psyche by R.J. Stewart. He's a very cool guy. He deals with the Merlin energies, Druidic energies, but last I knew, he was getting a fae or a fairy magical tradition out of the Welsh based on some of the early written materials in England of the Arthurian legends going. So he's a cool guy. Anyway, I didn't really pay a lot. I'd always liked Tibetan singing bowls and overtone chanting. Once I heard them, I was just instantly in love. But I didn't really get any access. When I was hanging out with Tibetan Buddhists for 20 years, I never really got access to learning how to do it, to overtone chant, and to how to use bowls, because the different traditions really didn't use bowls a lot. And I worked for several years at a local bookstore, and I started running across books. And I'm going, ooh, and I got to warn you, I'm a book person. I'm of the age where books are still important. So you got to just accept that. I'm going to show you some books and some other things. One of the things that probably 10, 12 years ago got me really starting to pay attention to sound, because I've had almost 20 years of not having really good health insurance and not having a lot of money for medical care. So I've been forced to study different things to keep me as healthy as I can be outside of the system. Well, this gentleman, Dr. Mitchell Gaynor, he's an oncologist. His book, The Healing Power of Sound, Recovery from Life-Threatening Illnesses Using Sound, Voice, and Music. Now, in the last year, I think he died in suspicious circumstances, but I think he's still got the Gaynor Oncology website, and you can look up sound healing on it. This gentleman discovered the metal bowls, but he didn't have a good source like I did, so he recommended crystal bowls. He teaches in this book how to create your own personal mantra, how to use your own tone, your own singing, your own voices, while doing the metal bowls or the crystal bowls for your own healing work. I mean, the guy was a specialist. He dealt with cancer patients, intensive care, all sorts of stuff. And he was discovering that this aided the process. So, a very good establishment guy. There's somebody that I got his CDs, and I think his name was Dr. Jeffrey Thompson. He was a chiropractor that was exploring sound, and he's got a lot of the brainwave technology music out there that I like so much that, again, I got from this bookstore. There's getting more into the holistic healing people now. Kay Gardner. When I first started my path back in the 80s, her Rainbow Path, A Guide to the Chakras, was what I used regularly, music-wise, to work with the chakras at the time. Now, this is cassette tapes. I don't think they're available anymore, but she's got the same series from Sounds True in CDs. And she talks about, she has some wonderful ideas in there, and she gets into music. You know, if you don't know what's the difference between rhythm and pitch and frequency and timbre and stuff, she talks about those things. But she also talks about things like you're somewhere and you're hearing a very obnoxious noise and it's getting on your nerves. Well, what you need to do is go up a fifth. So if the noise is going, you go, and then you tone it that while you're listening to that, and it cancels it out in your system. And she talked about using sound because once she'd been swimming and she was using sound because there was something in her ear. She'd been swimming and couldn't get all the water out, and she knew she was going to get sick if she didn't, but she had to be somewhere. So as she was driving home, she carefully found the tone of the water and literally toned the water out of her ears. And so, you know, it's an amazing thing. Uh, Jonathan Goldman, he's founded the Sound Healers Association that I'm a member of. I've gotten his overtone training. I've gotten some of his basic sound healer training. He grew up in a family of doctors, but he was very interested. He's a musician and he's very interested in sound. And he's the one that taught sound plus intention equal healing. Because he was trying to do a huge book on all these different kinds of sound healing around the world. And none of them, there was no consistency. You know, one Tibetan guru would say that you chant Om here. A Hindu guru might put Om, and he was going, there's nothing common. And he finally realized that it was intention behind it. And he talks a lot about harmonics. And harmonics, I'm not very good at it. I've got training, but I haven't spent as much time as I should at it. But uh, Kay Gardner actually talks about doing they're the overtoning. I don't know if you've ever heard the Tibetan Dripung chanters doing the overtoning where you tone a tone and like I said, I'm not that good at it yet. I got a lot of work to do. But there's a lot of really neat overtoners out there. And he actually gives you the basics if you want to work with sound healing. And I'm going to have to do a third session on this too. But sound healing in the body. Now I'm going to do a separate one on mantras. Mantras are a very important type of sound that we can use in our body, and the Western equivalent is called sonics. And I'm going to do a separate video on that. Now, Sharon Treshka, my favorite singing bowl book, Metal Himalayan Bowls. This gentleman's mother was, if I remember correct, a Tibetan yogini. His father was a Hindu rishi, and he lived in a poor area of Kathmandu, and he got a lot of training from a dozen different specialists and brought it here to America so that we could start coming back into balance with sound and our own energies like they were doing in other parts of the world. And the last book that's really cool, this one, The Healing Tones of Crystal Bowls by Renee Brody. And again, most of these I got at the bookstore I was working at. This book obviously is crystal bowls more, but there's a lot of cool stuff that I'm going to get into part 3, and I didn't realize this. But she gets into a lot of really cool stuff on this. So if you're going to work with bowls, there is a couple bowl books that have been out for 20 years. They're okay, but these two are probably the best if you want to basically take bowls and run with them.